So let's take a little look at these skills. Firewall gains synergy from Warmth and Inferno. We're only going to take a look at Warmth though. So Warmth is a skill you can place as a synergy. And then also Fire Mastery. We're going to take a look at this skill as well, giving us a fire damage percentage as we put more and more points into it. Pretty neat. So priority-wise, you're going to want to always put points into Firewall. That will be the highest damage increase that you can do. The only point that you can spend that will give more damage than putting a point into Firewall is the first level of Fire Mastery. And this is simply because, for two reasons. It gives you 30% fire damage just for the 1 point. And as we'll continue to talk about, Fire Mastery also benefits from your plus skills. So you see my first point here actually gives me 65% because I have a total of +5 to skills, right? So that's pretty nifty right there. That's a huge increase in damage. So don't forget to do that at level 30 when Fire Mastery unlocks. Something about Diablo 2, if you're not acquainted or you've forgotten, Firewall only unlocks at level 18. It's a level 18 skill. You can only invest as many points into a skill as you have levels above that skill unlocks. So if I'm level 21, for example, I can only invest 18, 19, 20, 21, 4 points into Firewall at that time. I can't invest any more. I'm just, it won't let you, the game won't let you do that. Same goes for Fire Mastery. So even though these are the higher priority things to do, you might not be allowed to do that, and you might have to save up points for spending them on both Fire Mastery and Firewall at the same time later in the leveling process. And we'll get into detail into the leveling progression later. It's just something I want to mention now. Now the question between what is better, let's say we've leveled Firewall all the way to 20 points and it is now capped out. What is better, Fire Mastery or Warmth? There's a common misconception that Fire Mastery is always going to be better than Warmth. This is simply not the case. I mean, there is a certain point at which your fire damage percentage reaches when Warmth will start to give you more of a damage increase. And what I mean is we're getting 4% damage per level from Warmth. We're getting 7% from Fire Mastery. However, Fire Mastery as a skill is additive with itself, which means as you put more and more into it, the relative increase from putting a point in Fire Mastery is not going to be 7%. It's going to be quite much lower. And in fact, when you reach 182%, this is the break even between Fire Mastery and Warmth, where 1 point in Fire Mastery will no longer be of more benefit than a point in Warmth for DPS. So you'll see here I'm level 22. However, I still have not reached 182, so we're going to put one more point. So a level 23 soft point into Fire Mastery, including the plus skills, so we've hit that. That's when you'll start putting points into Warmth. And then that's a good balance in DPS. And you'll notice here, my level 53 Sorceress has ended up, yes, with more points into Fire Mastery than Warmth, but that's only because the number of plus skills that I have from gear and items is not that high. You can see here we have +3 from the torch, which you probably wouldn't have at that point in the leveling progression. I'm just using it to show that you can benefit from not only plus all to skills, plus the sorcerer's skill levels, but you can also benefit from plus to fire skills. The mage fists also give an increase to Fire Mastery. This amount of plus skills, +5, is still fairly low, relatively low, and in this configuration, yes, you will probably end up with less points in Warmth than Fire Mastery if you are trying to optimize for DPS. Now here's another example where you'll see a more in-game setup where we have a lot of plus to skills. We've got a Shaco, Heart of the Oak, a Spirit, we've got all these plus to skills. It's plus 11 total that we have from gear and items. And you'll notice we hit 182%, or in this case 184, our level 23 Fire Mastery, assuming that there are no other sources of fire damage, because it's not just Fire Mastery we have to pay attention to. We have to look at the fire damage percent stat on our character sheet, advanced tab. That's what we're looking at. If that is 182 or less, you will prefer placing points into Fire Mastery. However, if it is higher than that, you will start to put points in Warmth. And what you notice is when you have a lot of plus skills, the hard points I've invested into Fire Mastery are actually fairly limited here, because I capped out, I hit the break even between Fire Mastery and Warmth relatively quickly with my plus to skills. And what this means is you'll be investing more points into Warmth. And you see this setup has 15 points in Warmth and 12 points in Fire Mastery. And that happens to be the more optimized setup for DPS. Very cool stuff, right? Warmth has the added benefit of increasing our mana regen. You'll see here the stat itself increases the rate at which we recover mana. And as you invest more and more points into this, it will be quite helpful, though not as good as an Insight rune word on your mercenary will help out with, right? One thing you have to understand about mana regen in general is that mana recovery rate greatly depends not only on your mana regen percentage, but also your maximum amount of mana. If you have very low maximum mana, but a ton of regen, you're still not going to be recovering a lot of mana per second. But if your mana pool is high and you have a lot of regen, you will regenerate more mana. And in the case that this build, Firewall in particular, one of the other benefits of it is that we are investing into Warmth, which means eventually, once our mana pool reaches a large size, you may not even need an Insight rune word weapon for the mercenary, which is super cool. To be able to cast your spells and get by and teleport around and stuff like that. So that's another benefit, is Insight is really good as a mercenary weapon, but sometimes it's just not hard hitting as some of the other physical weapons can be. So there's another benefit there. But I'm getting sidetracked. Let's take a look at the leveling progression. And this is the skill point progression from level 1 all the way to level 49. So we'll start at the beginning. And you'll notice here the first couple of points you might put into Frozen Armor, and then you put at least 1 point into Warmth. And personally, I prefer to level Warmth all the way to at least level 5. And the only reason we're doing this is because we have extra points. There's nothing else for this particular build in the leveling progression that we can do with our skill points. There is the option here at this point, if you want your level 6, you can put 2 points, 1 point into Frost Nova and 1 point into Static Field if you so desire, because these are good 1 point wonders and they will help out earlier on in the leveling progression. So if you're intending to respec later on, that's good. But when I leveled up, I preferred to save these points. Actually, in my play session, I took the Static Field point, but I never used it because Firewall just hits so damn hard. It just hits so hard, you never need it. So you can actually save those skill points if you want and avoid a respec. And you can also put those points into your Warmth as well. And basically what you'll see is this point. You'll have 7 points in Warmth. Now it's really important that you don't put any more points in Warmth at this point in the leveling process. If you do that, later on you won't be able to level both your Fire Mastery and your Firewall at the same time and get to the highest DPS as quick as possible. So At 7 points, definitely stop. 5 points if you're investing into those other skills. Just stop putting into warmth. We're going to use items to give us, such as this eagle orb or maybe a staff in the beginning of the game, to give you plus to fire bolt. They're really cheap and easy to acquire. This will get you by at these earlier levels while you're in Act 1. And the leveling process from Act 1 to Act 2 is very slow for this particular build, but you make up for it when you hit Act 2 and beyond, and normal and nightmare is just like so fast because of firewall, once you get firewall. So we're going to continue leveling here. You put a point into telekinesis, inferno, prerequisites, and then when you hit level 12, you get blaze. And basically you're going to swap from using firebolt immediately to start using blaze. So it creates a wall of fire in your wake, and you'll just run next to your enemies and that will deal damage to them. And this is actually a really good way to get from 12 to 18 until you can use your firewall. Once you hit 18, you'll be saving up your points, you won't spend them. Then you put a point into both teleport and firewall at the same time. That way you'll be able to, you're not going to use teleport earlier on because the mana cost is so high, but you can use it to, if you are level 18 by the time you get to the Var Oasis, for example, the caverns there, it's a very nice spell to use. Jumping over some of the walls in Act 3 and the bridges in Act 3 is actually a very useful spell to have. But we get firewall, and every point after that we're going to continue placing a point into firewall. And you'll notice here, once we get in close to level 30, we're level 29 right now, we'll then put our first point into fire mastery. But since we've been saving so many extra points, we will also at the same time put a point into firewall. And each level after this, all the way to level 37, we'll be putting 1 point into firewall and 1 point into fire mastery as well, just to get the max DPS, which is quite nice. After level 37, you can then no longer put any more points. You've maxed out your firewall. You can't put any more points into fire mastery because you haven't leveled enough to do that. So each remaining level, you're then going to, my preference, like max DPS, you would just continue leveling fire mastery. However, I feel it's okay to just put some points into warmth. That's perfectly fine, and you'll end up with something like this where you're 1 point ahead on fire mastery and you have warmth. And you may be wondering, well, you just told us that it's more beneficial in this stage of the game when you don't have as many plus skills to invest in the fire mastery. That's true, but this early on in the leveling progression, it's actually more beneficial in my opinion to go for the mana recovery. And something you have to understand, the extra DPS we're talking about here, it's only 5% this early on that you're going to get an increase over running a setup that is unoptimized and getting more mana efficiency. It's more about endurance this early on, and it's harder actually to gain mana than it is to deal damage, and Firewall's already dealing a ton of damage. You can sacrifice 5% of your DPS to gain 5% more mana regen. I think that's totally worth it. So that's why I level these in balance.